My straight friend laughed about being gay for me, until he went quiet. I've always believed that the cruelest thing about love isn't heartbreak. It's the way it can sneak up on you, wrap itself around moments you didn't even think twice about, and then refuse to let go. That's exactly how it happened with him. He was my best friend. The kind of friend people assumed I'd known forever, even though we'd only met a few years before. He had this easy smile, the kind that made you feel like you weren't just being looked at, you were being seen. He was straight. Or at least that's what he always said. That's what everyone knew. And I, being me, told myself to never even think about crossing that line. But the problem is, when someone feels like home, your heart doesn't always respect boundaries. It started one night the way so many of our nights did. Sitting on his couch, half watching a stupid movie, half talking about nothing. He made some offhand joke. Something about how if he were gay, he'd be gay for me. And I laughed. Of course I laughed. That's what you do when your straight best friend says something like that. You roll your eyes, you shove his shoulder, you laugh like it doesn't make your stomach twist and your heart ache. But here's the thing I wasn't prepared for. After I laughed, he didn't. He just went quiet. His smile lingered, but it was different. Like it had been stolen by a thought he wasn't ready to say out loud. His eyes flicked toward me and then away, like he wanted to hold my gaze but couldn't. I felt the air shift between us, the way you feel the sudden drop before a storm. I tried to play it off. I made another joke, grabbed the popcorn, asked him about the game he was watching earlier. But his laugh didn't come back the same. It was softer, nervous, and for the first time in all the years I'd known him, I couldn't read him. That silence haunted me, because when you've been close to someone for so long, you notice when something breaks the rhythm. You notice the pauses, the hesitation, the way their words suddenly weigh more than they should. And that night, sitting next to him with the glow of the TV painting shadows on his face, I realized I was terrified. Terrified that maybe I wanted him in a way I couldn't take back. Terrified that maybe, just maybe, he wanted me too. And that terrified me even more. The next few days were strange. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic. Just little shifts. He texted me later than usual. He lingered in our conversations, stretching them out like he didn't want to let them end. He touched me more, casually, like it didn't mean anything, but I felt it in my bones every time. A hand on my shoulder, a nudge against my leg, fingers brushing mine when he handed me something. And yet, neither of us said a word. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over. His joke, my laugh, his silence. The way he looked at me, almost like he was asking a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was desperate, that it was cruel to read into something that wasn't there. But then there were moments that didn't let me dismiss it. Like the time we were walking home and it started raining. Just a soft drizzle, not enough to run. He didn't move away when our shoulders pressed together under the same umbrella. He leaned into me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, close enough that I felt the warmth of his arm through his jacket. He didn't pull back. Or the time we were at a party and someone teased him about how much time he spent with me. "What are you, secretly dating him?" one of our friends joked. He didn't laugh it off the way he usually did. He just smirked and said, "Maybe I am." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But my chest felt tight because once again he didn't. He just looked at me. And then he went quiet. I don't know if you've ever been caught in a moment like that, with someone you can't have, someone you're not supposed to want. But it's like living in two worlds at once. In one, you're just friends. Safe, normal, untouchable. In the other, you're falling every second, wondering if they'll catch you, or if they'll let you hit the ground. I didn't know which world I was living in with him anymore. And the worst part was, I didn't know if he did either. The thing about friendship is it builds on predictability. You get used to knowing how the other person will act, what they'll say, when they'll laugh. You find comfort in the patterns, the inside jokes, the unspoken rules. But suddenly, with him, none of that felt stable anymore. Every interaction felt like a question mark. Every glance, every silence, every smile held weight. It was exhausting and intoxicating at the same time. One evening, we were at his place again. It was late, later than we usually stayed up, and the quiet between us was heavier than usual. He was scrolling through his phone, pretending not to be distracted, while I sat there pretending I wasn't watching him. Then, out of nowhere, he said it again. "If I was gay," he started, voice trailing off like he was testing the air. "I'd probably be gay for you." I froze. It was the exact same words as before, but this time they landed differently. This time he wasn't laughing when he said it. This time his voice was softer, almost careful. I looked at him, searching his face for a hint of the punchline, waiting for him to grin, to chuckle, to break the tension. But he didn't. He just looked at me with this unreadable expression, somewhere between a dare and a confession. And my heart betrayed me. Skipped, it stuttered, it screamed. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to lean in and close the distance. But I also wanted to run, to laugh it off, to protect myself from the possibility that I was only hearing what I wanted to hear. So I said nothing. And he, after a long pause, looked back at his phone, like the words had never left his lips. That night I barely slept. My mind was on a loop, replaying the moment again and again, torturing myself with the possibilities. Was he teasing me? Was he experimenting with words, seeing how they sounded out loud? Or was he trying to tell me something he didn't have the courage to say directly? I thought about the way his voice dipped lower, about how his eyes lingered on mine just a fraction too long. I thought about the way he went quiet afterward, like he was waiting for me to speak. And then I thought about all the times before, the hand on my shoulder, the smirk at the party, the way he leaned into me under the umbrella. A pattern was forming, but I didn't know if it was real or if my heart was connecting dots that didn't exist. The next day, I tried to act normal. I tried to pretend nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. We went out with a group of friends that weekend. Drinks, laughter, the usual chaos of being young and careless. But the whole time, I was hyper-aware of him. At one point, the music was loud and the lights were dim, and he leaned close to say something in my ear. I don't even remember the words. Something stupid about someone else at the bar. But what I remember is the way his breath brushed my skin. The way his lips were close enough that if I tilted my head an inch, they'd touch mine. And I swear, just for a second, he didn't pull back. He lingered there, like he was waiting to see if I would. But I couldn't. Fear glued me in place. Later that night, after everyone else had left, we walked home together. The streets were quiet, just the sound of our footsteps echoing. He was unusually quiet, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You've been weird lately," he said finally. I laughed too quickly. "Me? You're the one who's been weird." He smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Maybe." Then he glanced at me, eyes searching mine in the dim streetlight. "Does it bother you?" The question knocked the air out of me. "Does what bother me?" I asked, though I already knew. "You know," he shrugged, suddenly guarded. "The jokes. The way I mess with you sometimes." There it was. The opening I had been waiting for. I could have said it right then. I could have asked him if they were jokes at all. I could have admitted that it did bother me, not because I hated it, but because I wanted it to mean something. But I didn't, because I was scared. So instead, I forced a smile and said, "Nah, it doesn't bother me." And just like that, the wall slammed back down between us. But here's the thing, walls don't erase feelings. They only trap them. The more I tried to pretend nothing was happening, the more it consumed me. I thought about him constantly, about what he meant, about what he wanted, about what would happen if I reached out and grabbed the thing that seemed to be dangling right in front of me. One night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. We were sitting outside on his porch, the kind of night where the air feels thick with unsaid things. He was drinking a beer, leaning back in his chair, staring up at the stars. "Do you ever?" I started, then stopped. My chest tightened, fear crawling up my throat. He turned his head, raising an eyebrow. "Do I ever what?" I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "Never mind. Forget it." But he didn't let it go.
"No, seriously."
"What?" And for a moment I thought, this is it. This is where everything changes. This is where I stop being a coward and just tell him. But before I could speak, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled faintly, and the moment was gone. I swallowed my words, like I had so many times before. It was becoming unbearable. Every time he brushed against me, every time he said something that hovered between joke and confession, every time he looked at me with those unreadable eyes, I felt myself breaking a little more. Because love, when it's unspoken, becomes its own kind of prison. You pace the walls of what you can't say, what you can't ask, what you can't risk. And I was drowning inside those walls. What I didn't know then was that he was drowning too. Just in a different way. I found out by accident. It was late one night, later than usual, and I was scrolling on my phone when I saw his name pop up online. A green dot glowing next to it. I hesitated. Should I message him? Was I being too much lately? Was I imagining the distance that seemed to grow and shrink depending on the day? Before I could decide, he messaged me first. "You awake?" 2 words. Simple. Harmless. But my chest tightened anyway. "Yeah." I typed back. "What's up?" There was a long pause. I could see the typing bubble appear, disappear, reappear, like he was fighting himself. Finally, his reply came. "Do you ever wonder what it'd be like?" My heart stopped. "Like what?" I asked, fingers trembling as I typed. Another long pause. Then, "You and me." I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. A dozen responses raced through my head. Honest ones, reckless ones, safe ones. But I froze. I didn't know if he was drunk, if he was joking, if he was lonely. I didn't know if this was the moment I'd been waiting for or just another trap. So I played it safe. I sent back, "You're drunk." Seconds later, he replied, "Maybe." Then nothing else. I lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, my chest aching with all the things I didn't say. The next day, he acted like nothing happened. No mention of the messages. No hesitation in his smile. No crack in his voice. It was like the words had vanished into thin air. And I let him. I didn't bring it up either. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I forced the conversation, I'd lose the one thing I couldn't bear to lose, him. But something had changed. I could feel it in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. In the way his laughter came slower, like he was holding something back. In the way his silences stretched, heavy and unspoken. I think we were both waiting for each other, for a sign, for a slip of courage. Came one night when neither of us expected it. We were in his room, sprawled across his bed after playing video games. The TV was still on, its glow flickering against the walls, but neither of us was really paying attention. He was lying on his side, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body even without touching. And then he said, so quietly I almost missed it, "Sometimes I think about kissing you." The world stopped. My breath caught, my chest caving in under the weight of those words. I turned my head slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast the moment would shatter. He was staring at the ceiling, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. I whispered, "You do." He nodded once, still not looking at me. "Yeah." A pause. "Is that bad?" My heart was breaking and healing at the same time. "No," I whispered. My voice shook. "It's not bad." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was electric, heavy, alive. Then, finally, he turned his head. Our eyes met, and the silence said everything words couldn't. But instead of leaning in, instead of closing that last impossible inch, he exhaled shakily and turned away again. And just like that, the moment dissolved. After that night, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't tell myself it was all in my head. I couldn't dismiss the touches, the jokes, the silences. He had admitted it, maybe not fully, maybe not clearly, but enough. Enough to confirm what I'd felt all along. There was something between us, something real. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that something doesn't always mean enough. Because the more real it became, the more he pulled back. He started avoiding being alone with me, started canceling plans, started filling his time with other people, other places. When we were together, he was distracted, fidgety, always glancing away like he couldn't stand the weight of my eyes on him. It was killing me. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. We were sitting in his car, parked outside my apartment. The engine was off, the world was quiet, and the distance between us felt unbearable. So I said it. "What are we doing?" He froze. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." My voice cracked. "All these things you say, the way you look at me, the texts, the everything. What is it?" He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "I don't know. That's not good enough," I whispered. He finally turned to me, eyes raw and conflicted. "I'm not." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I'm not gay." The words hit me like a punch, even though I'd been expecting them. "I know," I said softly. "Then what is this?" he demanded, frustration in his voice. "Because I don't get it. I don't get why I think about you like this. I don't get why I want things I shouldn't want." And in that moment I saw it, the fear in his eyes, the war inside him, the way he was unraveling under the weight of wanting something that didn't fit the story he'd always told himself about who he was. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to tell him it was okay. I wanted to tell him that wanting me didn't erase who he was. But all I could do was sit there, silent, as his breath came heavy and uneven. Finally, he whispered, "I can't do this." And before I could say anything, he started the car. That drive home was the longest of my life. Neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, suffocating. When he pulled up to my place, I reached for the door handle, my heart breaking in my chest. But then, just as I was about to step out, his hand shot out and grabbed mine. I froze. He held on tight, his grip trembling. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, but his voice cracked when he whispered, "I don't want to lose you." And that's when I realized he wasn't just fighting me. He was fighting himself. And I didn't know which battle would win. I didn't sleep that night. His words, "I don't want to lose you," echoed through my head until the sunrise bled into my room. They were supposed to comfort me, but they didn't. They were supposed to mean hope, but they didn't. They meant limbo. They meant that he wanted to keep me close, but not too close. That he wanted me enough to hold on, but not enough to step forward. And I was stuck. For days, nothing changed. He texted me like normal, made plans like normal, cracked jokes like normal. But underneath it all was a tension so thick it suffocated me. Every time his name popped up on my phone, my chest tightened. Every time he smiled at me, I wondered if it was the last time. Every time his shoulder brushed mine, I couldn't tell if it was on purpose or if I was just fooling myself. The worst part? I couldn't talk to anyone about it. To the world, he was my straight best friend. To me, he was the boy who whispered about kissing me, the boy who told me he couldn't, the boy who clung to my hand like I was the only thing keeping him afloat. It felt like I was living a double life, except both lives were happening in the same room with the same person. Then came the night everything cracked open. We were at his place again, just us. No games, no movies, no distractions. Just sitting there, trying to act like the silence wasn't eating us alive. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Do you ever think," I asked quietly, "that maybe this is more than a joke?" He froze. His eyes flicked to mine, wide, startled, like I had said something forbidden. I swallowed hard. "Because I do. I think about it all the time. And I can't keep pretending it doesn't mean anything." He stared at me, his jaw tightening, his breath shallow. For a moment I thought he'd yell or laugh or push me away. But instead, his face crumpled. And then he whispered, "I think about it too." The room spun. Before I could respond, before I could even process, he leaned forward. Fast, desperate, and his lips brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss. Not really. It was too brief, too shaky, too uncertain. But it was real. It was his. And it shattered me. For a moment, the world was silent. Then he pulled back, eyes wide, panic already rising in them. "Shit," he whispered. I shouldn't have." But before he could finish, I grabbed his wrist. My voice was shaking but firm. "Don't you dare say it didn't mean anything." He stared at me, torn between fear and longing. His chest rose and fell quickly, like he was trying to catch his breath after running. And then, finally, he whispered, "It meant everything." This time, when our lips met, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a whisper in the dark. It was a kiss. A real one. It wasn't perfect. His hands shook. My heart raced so fast I thought it might explode. We broke apart and laughed nervously, only to fall back into each other seconds later, like gravity itself had been waiting for this moment. For those few minutes, nothing else existed. Not labels. Not fear. Not the world outside his bedroom walls. Just us. But reality has a cruel way of creeping back in. Because after the kiss, after the laughter and the shaky smiles, came the silence. And in that silence I saw it, the storm in his eyes. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I don't know what this makes me. I don't know what it means." My chest ached. I wanted to tell him it didn't matter, that we didn't need to define it, that we could just be. But I could see it, his fear, his confusion, the weight of all the things he'd been told about what it meant to want someone like me. So instead, I said softly, "It just means you wanted me. That's all." He looked at me like he wanted to believe that, like he wanted to crawl inside that simple truth and let it protect him from everything else. But he couldn't, and I knew it. The days after that were harder than anything before. We didn't talk about the kiss. We didn't talk about what it meant. But it hung between us, heavy, undeniable. Sometimes he'd look at me with that same quiet longing, and I'd wonder if he was about to pull me in again. Other times, he'd pull away entirely, avoiding me like I was a mirror he couldn't bear to face. I was stuck in the in-between, caught between the sweetness of what we'd shared and the ache of what he couldn't accept. And then, one night, it broke. He showed up at my door, drunk. His eyes were glassy, his words slurred. "Why do you do this to me?" he asked, voice cracking. "Why do you make me feel like this?" I tried to calm him down, tried to guide him inside, but he pushed against me, desperate. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, tears spilling down his face. "And it scares the hell out of me." I held him as he cried, my own tears falling silently, because I realized in that moment, it wasn't just about me. It was about him, about the war inside him, the story he'd been told his whole life about who he was allowed to love. And I couldn't fight that war for him. The next morning, he apologized, said he didn't remember much, said maybe it was best if we took some space. And I, because I loved him too much to make it harder, agreed. But when he left, I sat on my bed, staring at the empty space where he'd been, and I broke. Because sometimes love doesn't end with a clean break. Sometimes it ends with silence, with distance, with the quiet acknowledgement that wanting someone isn't always enough to keep them. And yet, even through the heartbreak, even through the ache of losing him, a part of me still held on to that one small truth. For one moment, just one, he wanted me too. Space. That's what he said we needed. That's what I told myself I could handle. But space has a way of stretching wider and wider until you're not sure there's any bridge left between you. At first, I thought it would be temporary. A week, maybe two. Long enough for him to sort himself out, to quiet the storm inside him, to come back when he was ready. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into a silence that felt like a wall I couldn't climb. I saw him less and less. At first, he'd text me short messages checking in. Then the text slowed. Then they stopped. And suddenly, the boy who once filled every corner of my life was gone. But not gone, because he was still there. In the photos on my phone, in the songs we shared, in the jokes I couldn't tell anyone else because no one else would understand. He was in the empty seat next to me on the bus, the empty chair across from me at the cafe, the space in my bed where I used to imagine him lying. He was everywhere, except with me. I told myself I'd move on. I told myself I had to. I went on dates. I met people. I smiled when they touched my hand. I laughed when they kissed me. I pretended that my chest wasn't aching with the memory of someone else. But every time I found myself comparing them to him. To his laugh, his eyes, his silences. To the way he once whispered he thought about kissing me. To the way he once held my hand in the dark like I was his lifeline. And no one could measure up. Not because they weren't good enough, but because they weren't him. Then, months later, I saw him again. It was an accident. I was at a mutual friend's party, half bored, half distracted, when I heard his laugh. God, that laugh. I could have picked it out in a crowded stadium. I turned, and there he was, standing across the room, drink in hand, looking just the same and completely different all at once. His hair was a little shorter, his shirt a little tighter, but his eyes were still the ones that had undone me 1,000 times before. For a second, our gazes met, and I swear, the whole room disappeared. Then he looked away. Later that night, I found myself outside, leaning against the porch railing, trying to steady my breath. The air was cool, the noise of the party muffled behind me, and then I heard the door creak. He stepped out, closing it softly behind him. For a long moment we just stood there, a few feet apart, the silence stretching. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, hesitant. Hey, I said, my throat tight. He shifted, looking down at his drink. It's been a while. Yeah, I said. It has. Another silence. Then, softly, he added, I missed you. The words hit me like a wave I wasn't ready for. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask why he'd left, why he'd pulled away, why he'd kissed me only to disappear. I wanted to demand answers, closure, something. But all I could manage was, I missed you too. We talked for a while that night. Small talk at first, circling around the truth like it was dangerous ground. But eventually, the conversation cracked open, and everything came spilling out. He admitted he'd been scared, that he didn't know how to face me, how to face himself, that every time he thought about me, he felt both alive and terrified. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his voice breaking, but I didn't know how not to, and I told him the truth I had carried all along. You already did. He flinched, his eyes glistening. I'm sorry. And for the first time, I believed him. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't fall back into each other's arms. There was no fairy tale ending waiting for us on that porch. But there was something else. There was honesty. There was pain, yes, but there was also healing. There was the quiet acknowledgement that what we had shared was real, even if it couldn't last. And in a strange, bittersweet way, that was enough. Here's the truth I've come to learn. Sometimes the people who break us are also the people who show us what love is supposed to feel like. Sometimes the ones who leave are the same ones who teach us how to hold on tighter the next time. Sometimes love doesn't end with forever. It ends with a memory of a laugh, of a silence, of a kiss that shouldn't have happened but did. And even though it broke me, even though it left scars I'll carry for years, I don't regret it. Because for a little while, my straight friend wasn't just my friend. For a little while, he was mine. And that little while was worth everything.